Perfect. So, hello, everybody. I want to start off with what is this term Fab City when we speak of this term Fab City? You can just go to the next one.
Yeah. I'm just looking. Maybe you can control it but I'll do it. Okay.
So, and I picked this right up from the Fab City Summit website. The Global Fab City Initiative thus acts as a global infrastructure and source of knowledge for the radical transformation of the way we work, live, and evolve in cities. And I really want to start with that because radical transformation is at the center of Fab Cities. And so when we look at radical transformation, of course, at one point, we're going to be looking at all the other aspects that influences and touches. And when we talk about Fab City, we're talking about two things of this. So one is radically transforming all the systems that we've given ourselves. So our food systems, our transportation systems, our energy systems, our manufacturing systems, all those different systems are what we're radically transforming in Fab City initiatives. And those systems are so important to transform, and they're easy enough to talk about because they're tangible and we can see those systems. They're part of our everyday around us. But no less important are something that's a little bit less tangible to see, and it's our ways of being together. So the culture, the governance systems, the way we are in relationships, the way we cooperate, the way we really work with our interdependence and being together and asking each other for help. So if we can just leave that. Well, no, let's go here for a second. So go ahead. Sorry, Benjamin. So when we look at the different amazing initiatives that are coming out of Fab City, they're innovative, they're inspiring, and they're all sorts of things that are co-creating a better future that makes sense for our world, that's more equitable, more participatory, more sustainable, more thrivable, and everything. But those initiatives, if they work with ways of functioning, governing, organizing, and functioning together from the old paradigm, that will pull those initiatives down. So if we're still working with hierarchical systems, if we're still working with micromanagement, if we're still working with some of the legacy ways of functioning together that have come to us from basically the world as we know it now, that will not be supporting the system, whatever system change we're doing. And in the same way, if we use governance systems and cultural systems that are part of the new paradigm and building towards a new future, those initiatives, be it energy or manufacturing or food initiatives, will be lifted, amplified, more resilient, and have greater impact. And so this is one of the things that when we're looking at Fab City, governance isn't just part, it isn't one thing that just is on the side. It actually crosses all the different initiatives that are going on in creating our Fab Cities. So if we could just leave the presentation for a moment, I'm just going to come back to this in a more concrete, tangible way. So my name is Samantha Slade. I'm with Percolab Cooperative. Could we exit the presentation, Benjamin? Thanks. I'm with Percolab Cooperative, and we're an international network of cooperatives working in co-creation and social innovation, really supporting courageous organizations, communities, and groups to sort of step away from the legacy ways that we have of functioning and step into more holistic, democratic, participatory ways of functioning for our future. And to do this requires one thing. It requires experimentation, risk-taking, and getting comfortable with discomfort, because I have a saying that if it's feeling comfortable, then you aren't really doing the radical transformation that you're dreaming of. So when we come to governance, people are like, well, how does all this fit with governance? Like, I mean, I hear the idea of like new paradigm in governance, but what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How do you get concrete around it? And so we can read a lot about the new paradigm of governance or ways of doing things, but there's nothing like a felt experience of what that could mean. And I mean, I've asked the questions, how do we get more playful about governments? How do we get more relational about governance? How do we get just more governance focusing that's more inclusive and democratic? How do we approach governance from ways that have a freshness that speak of what we're creating in Fab Cities? So rather than continue to talk about it, one of the things that I really think is great about the Fab City initiative is we're doing together and making together. So we're getting hands-on. So of course, what I would like us to do would be something that's very hands-on, just for the next 5 minutes, so that we all get in and get a felt experience of what I mean by radically transforming our governance systems. So if everybody would like to open, those people who are comfortable would like to open their screens and partake in this, this would be absolutely fabulous. To do it, all you need is an actual pen or marker and a piece of paper, because there's something also about using physical things. Back to Fab City is not good just for Fab City, but it's also in our way of doing things. There's something real that happens when we're using hands-on stuff. And I'm just going to start. We're gonna go very very light to approach it as a bit of a game. Okay, so can we reach out just for objects that are around us, and everybody show an object of something that's around you wherever you're sitting? Got a phone, got a mug. Let's go with the mug. Caroline, got your mug. All right, so let's go. What's the purpose of a mug? What's the purpose of a mug? So take your pen, take your paper in a few seconds, 10, 12 seconds. What's the purpose of a mug? All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to show our paper and we're going to read what we wrote without like justifying it or apologizing for it. It's all good, whatever was written. So I'll start. To beautify a moment and hold a drink often hot.
Drink.
I don't know if you will see because it's blurring, but what I wrote is contain liquid to drink, to measure, to mix, or to contain solid as well. So it's more a pragmatic definition.
Here's mine. It says hold, and then I put in brackets hot liquid, so it can be easily drunk, and I put in brackets by a person.
Well, its words is quite very simple for drinking, containing, decoration, and cheering.
Fabulous. Is there any objections to any of those purposes that came out? A lot of diversity, all sounding really good. Here comes Paul Schultz.
Samantha, I'm just telling you, it's 8:14 right now.
Perfect. So can you show your objects again? And I'm going to pick a second object and we're going to go again with another one. Oh, scissors. Let's go. Great. Scissors. What's the purpose of scissors? Hello, Paul. We're in a lived governance activity. So just stay with us, get your piece of paper and write on it. What's the purpose of scissors in 10 seconds? And I'll start. Everybody's almost ready. Just waiting. Okay, mine is to cut things safely.
So here is cut and making beautiful collage.
I wrote.
Go, Karen.
Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Cut paper by hand.
Mhm. I wrote cut a sheet of material or divide the pieces.
Well, I'm still very simple. That's to cutting and sharpening.
Beautiful. So again, 5 different ways of expressing the purpose of scissors. See how we're just playing? It's a couple of seconds. We're going to go again. What's the purpose of the Fab City Summit? Everybody's almost ready? And I'll start. To grow, strengthen, amplify the Fab City movement.
I got sharing, promoting, and maybe dancing.
I have come together to learn and share around Fab cities now and for their future.
I have a fabulous city, Fab City, a fabulous city where people feel free to exploring fabulous idea.
That's great. I got connecting people, ideas, process, and make it happen.
Wow. How about we do one final one? What's the purpose of governance? 15 seconds. All right. I got to help things flow fairly and with collective care.
I have take decisions so that something happens.
On a similar thing, I got know how to make decisions in all situations.
I could add decide for a collectivity and make decision together.
I have the efficiency, structuring, and mutual agreement framing.
So what we've just done, thank you everyone, is we have just collectively co-created purpose of things that actually usually would be scary to do, could be fraught with friction, could be serious, that we go to our rational mind to do. And we just did it in a way that was playful, that was collective, that worked with our natural language. How did that feel to do what we just did? It was fun. It was playful. It didn't feel hard. It didn't feel like work. And so what was the science behind that is to go to the creative, playful space in our brains. We need to go, you can't just access them straight away. You have to have a warm up. So that's why we did 2 objects that were completely unrelated to anything serious in our brains. So they were carefully chosen so that our brains could disconnect from the serious workspace they're usually in. We did it once, that opened it. We did it 2 times, it anchored it. And then I brought it back to the workspace, and our creative parts of our brain were able to maintain their space there. And then I took it even to this crazy word that is governance, that usually if somebody asked you, what's the purpose of governance? You'd probably freeze up, you'd want to find the perfect words, you'd write something, you'd cross it out, you'd write something else, you'd cross it out, you'd apologize it, you justify it, you would look things up. And here we all were in actually accessing our deeper wisdom that's within us, very simply, very easily, very quickly, and surfacing it and seeing each other's and all the great diversity of human beings in the different words and perspectives that came out, and welcoming them together in real ease, right? So this in itself is 2 things that we just did here. We were in a practice of governance. And when we talk about the new paradigms and new ways of being in governance, that is a perfect example that we just lived. And secondly, when we talk about governance, anything we're doing with governance, the leader is the purpose. So if we can't get our purpose clear, how can we actually do good governance? So there was 2 things that were going on in there. And we were having a lived experience of what this new paradigm could be when we're working in ways that are more relational, more holistic, more authentic, more creative, more collective, more playful. And what we saw was that that was actually more productive than going at it as we usually do in our kind of official way of being professional and working that we've become accustomed to, and that actually is not as efficient, not as joyful to do. So before I close that up, it's just have any comments from any of you on what we just lived as an experience of governance.
Well, I think it's quite powerful, and more people should be initiated to having access to their creativity mode, so that meetings can be more joyful and productive.
I like the sentence, the leader is the purpose. It's not the matter of one person, it's the matter of finding the purpose together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if I go back to Benjamin, if you can show us that, do a screen share back to that initial image that the presentation, and go to the very last image. What you have here is, so when I was talking about the new paradigm ways of dealing with governance, that it uplifts an initiative, what it was actually doing is our way of being authentic together and even vulnerable together and playful together builds trust. Our way of doing that in a collective, inclusive way builds belonging, and our way of doing sort of playful, emergent, experimental builds innovation. And these are the 3 things that we want in our ways of approaching governance. We want trust, we want innovation, and we want belonging. And so when we're functioning with our Fab City initiatives, this is what we want to be doing. And so I want to close with just an invitation for everybody to really think about an initiative around that's creating the futures we dream of, that's close to your heart, whatever initiative it is, just to hold it in your mind for a moment and look at it and think about how your governance is being approached in this initiative right now. Is governance being approached in a way that's uplifting it towards new paradigms of the future? Or is it taking on the legacy ways of approaching governance, which in fact is pulling it back a little bit? So if you want to think about that and think about what might you want to be doing and bringing into the way governance is being approached that could strengthen and amplify the way trust, innovation, and belonging becomes and is embedded as part of governance. And just one word for the end is the theory of change in here. When we talk about governance, we often talk about governance. It's very high level, very structural. And what I've just done is bringing us to a very micro practice that happens that you can embed in everyday processes anywhere. Those two really link. That's where the power is the micro practices that are building the pathway to the systemic change. And the systemic change is building up from the micro practices. And that is the little piece that I had to offer everybody today. If you'd like to find out more about functioning in ways that I call going horizontal, there's my book, Going Horizontal, Creating non-hierarchical organizations, one practice at a time. There's the Going Horizontal website and community that you can tap into to find out what's going on. And you can reach out to me, Samantha Slade, at sam@percolab.com. Thank you.
So depending on everybody's schedule, we have a lot of time for questions. So feel free to ask all questions. I do have one if nobody jumps in. Is it, I really like the idea of everything you showed us today. Is it a way of like is it horizontal governance? Is it a continuity, and we're trying to get more and more horizontal, or is it black and white, black or white situation where we're either horizontal or no?
So yeah,
because I feel like there has to be someone taking decision at the end.
So horizontal governance doesn't mean there's no, I mean, it doesn't mean things are flat. It doesn't mean everybody's involved in everything. It's a way of working more consciously and with more discernment around how we bring in inclusion and belonging and collective and accountability with a bias towards the togetherness, a bias towards I can trust my fellow human beings, a bias towards it's important to show up in our authenticity and our vulnerability and our transparency. These are different biases than we have that we've taken on as legacy from the corporate governance world that we have around us, which is you show up with your facade, you aren't your true self. Information is power, we hide things and we're opaque. We're not concerned about fair distribution and things like that. So it's a different bias, and then there's a journey, right? But what my background is cultural anthropology, and so the premise that's underlying all of my work is that horizontal governance is basically cooperation and good cooperation, and that's in our DNA as human beings. We know how to cooperate together. We are very good at cooperating together. It's just that the systems that we've given ourselves over the last while have really focused on and strengthened the individualism. And so we're just reconnecting and reclaiming our capacity to cooperate together. Does that answer that, Benjamin?
You know, because it's inside or within the governance, they have a, you know, maybe horizontal or hierarchy, but any of, you know, it's a gap between the communication or miscommunication, you know, because the government, it means a mutual agreement or something to make it everything efficiency or make it a leader to make the final decision. So if it's true or too large or something, you know, it's indicate to more effective for the communication at the early stage or after, you know, the final decision have to be making or, you know, finalized.
I'm not sure, was that a comment or a question?
I just mean that's, yeah, maybe because due to the connection. I just want to, but to raise the problems, when such one governance structure had been, proposed to people. So, and, to persuade people to follow, for example, that structure, it should be have a communication when you tell for the mutual or for the transparency or something. But I know some of the people, they still keep for very traditional mind of the following, hierarchical structure, because they believe that it's more effective. Because if you have a too large, no efficiency. So anything to warm up, how long for the warm up for to persuade people to follow that structure?
So from my experience, it's really difficult for people to imagine how effective horizontal ways of functioning is from a headspace. It's like you need to have a lived experience of it to work through all of your fears and assumptions and kind of projections and myths that you have about it. So people think, oh my God, if we go horizontal, it'll be inefficient, it'll create conflict or all of this stuff. You don't imagine it. Yet when we just lived an experience right now within 5 minutes of expressing different kinds of purpose in such an effective, even colorful, collective way, it was more productive than anything we could have done any other way. What I do know is that here in Quebec, we're working with public institutions that are completely hierarchical, but have consciousness that they want to function in different places where it's possible in more horizontal ways. And so we're working with that. And even public health is one that's come to us and we're working like that. And I think that more and more people are waking up to the limits of the assumptions and bias of the vertical systems that we've given ourselves, that just they're not connecting into what's all the beautiful potential of human beings.
There is a question in the chat from Caroline. So do you make a difference between collaboration and cooperation?
Caroline, I live in French and English, and it's just so terrible. When I'm in France, you can't use the word collaboration because of the history with the wars. So I don't use it. When you're in North America, everybody's like, oh, collaboration is so much more than cooperation. So my understanding from living in multiple languages and cultures is it doesn't really matter the word we give it. We know what we're talking about. I call it social practices of togetherness, almost as a way of avoiding that.
Okay, that's a good solution to make it more broad, because at the university we learned here in Montreal, we learned the difference between cooperative work and collaborative work. And it's true that in France it has another signification. But to me, collaboration is so much more than cooperation. Is more, each person is handing his own part and we make it whole together, where collaboration is a true process of making it together from the beginning to the end.
So I use the word co-creation a lot.
That's better, yeah.
And
I guess
social
so.
practices of togetherness.
Great, thank you.
And if that's all the questions or comments, then that brings us to the end of our session.